Alright, moving on here. Now let's examine democracies, and that's basically following the will of the people. There are a few systems we can go by. There's the parliamentary system. And basically what happens in a parliamentary system is that there's a legislature and it basically holds all the power and everything. However, as we see in reality, this model doesn't really hold because of the strong party discipline, such as in Great Britain. We'll talk more about that in detail when we get to the United Kingdom in general. And in the cabinet tends to bring forth the legislation. And in parliamentary democracies, the president, or technically the prime minister, is elected by the legislature. So it's an indirect vote. Uh, yeah, and another thing is that should not be me. Another thing is we have to differentiate between a head of state and the head of government. A head of state is the symbolic leader of the state. For instance, it would be a queen or a king, and the head of government is the leader of the actual government. So it would be a president or a prime minister. And then we have the presidential system. And the head of the state is the head of the government, and the president is directly elected. Where there are checks and balances between the judicial, the legislative, and the presidential. Not one branch has a significant more amount of power than the others. Well, as insignificant, I mean to the extent of parliamentary. But the separation of power can hinder how quickly legislations can be passed and acted. Typically, in parliamentary systems, legislature can be passed and acted very quickly, while in presidential systems, you'll have to deal with gridlock. And then we have the semi-presidential system, and it's basically the president and prime minister coexist, and their powers vary by country. Russia, India, France, and some other countries use this system. And now there are two types. There's direct democracies, which the individual has immediate say over an issue. For instance, like to bring up a historical example, in ancient Greece, you were required to put your topic in these forums. And then there's the indirect method in which individuals elect representatives to represent them. And that's pretty much in nearly every modern democracy, since it's very hard to get everyone to participate. And now we have authoritarian regimes, basically ruled by elites. But we have to remember these can be legitimate, as legitimate means the people accept the government's right to rule. They think the game is fine, etc. They'll follow it. We'll talk more about legitimacy in a bit. There's a couple types of authoritarianism. There's communism, which basically apart in reality what happened in China and Russia. The party controlled everything in society to ensure equality. That's for China and Russia. Then there's corporatism, where the government is intertwined with interest groups and talks with them before creating policies. And this can branch off into patron clientism, in which leaders provide favors to voters or other or subordinates, and then they do them favors. For instance, Tammany Hall in New York. If you've this isn't a Tammany Hall example, but if you've read The Jungle, I believe the main character, Yurgis Rudkis, he was given money to get the immigrants' votes, and that's sort of an example of patron clientism. Now here's some characteristics of authoritarianism. There's a small group of elites that rule